The Las Vegas Raiders are facing a crucial decision as they head into the offseason. With just one game remaining against the Chargers this Sunday, their focus will soon shift to the future of the team. One of the most pressing questions is who will be the quarterback going forward? This is a hot topic, especially after an intriguing report by Dane Brugler, a draft analyst for The Athletic. He shared an interesting quote from an AFC scout who said he felt bad for any team trying to find even one good quarterback from this year's draft class. The upcoming quarterback class is not looking great. Most experts are only confident in Cam Ward as a potential QB1, but even he is not a guaranteed first overall pick. As for other quarterbacks like Jalen Milroe or Shedder Sanders, some scouts believe they shouldn't even be considered in the first round. This brings a tough reality for teams like the Raiders, who may need to find a new quarterback but are faced with a weak pool of talent. Looking back, the Raiders' decision to not trade up for a quarterback last year may have been a wise one. Trading up for a higher pick would have meant giving up significant assets, which is not easy, especially when other positions also need attention. The Raiders wisely stuck with a best player available approach last year, which led to strong additions like Brock Bowers and Paris Johnson. As the offseason nears, the Raiders will need to carefully consider their options. With a limited number of quarterbacks worth taking in the first round, they might need to think outside the box. Instead of reaching for a quarterback early, they could focus on selecting the best available player at their pick, which could help strengthen the team in other areas. For example, if the Raiders have the 8th overall pick, they could go for someone like Ashton Gent, Abdul Carter, or even a standout cornerback like Will Johnson from Michigan. By taking the best player available at that pick and targeting a quarterback in the second round, the Raiders could build a strong foundation for the future. This strategy worked well last year, and with a deep running back class this year, they could even address that position in the third round. Players like R.J. Harvey could be available, but with his rising stock, it's likely he'll be drafted earlier than expected. The Raiders have a lot to think about, but they'll need to make wise decisions that secure the long-term success of the team. As the Raiders approach the offseason, one important decision they must make is whether to target a quarterback through the draft or explore veteran options. While the upcoming draft class may be lacking in elite quarterback talent, there are a few intriguing veterans who could be available. For instance, Dak Prescott and Kirk Cousins are both veterans who might be on the move, though it's unclear whether the Cowboys will part with Prescott. Cousins, likely heading into free agency, could be a solid addition for the Raiders if they decide to go that route. Another option the Raiders might explore is Sam Darnold, though I personally doubt he'll be available. Despite some Raider fans calling for Darnold to be brought in, the Vikings likely view him as a key part of their future after a strong season. The Vikings may be more inclined to move on from their younger quarterback, J.J. McCarthy, who has yet to fully prove himself. However, if the Raiders wanted to take a chance on McCarthy, they could try trading for him. The question remains whether he's worth a top pick like the 8th overall selection. It's a tough call, because the pick itself holds significant value, and McCarthy, while talented, still has a lot to prove. Beyond these veterans, there are other quarterbacks in similar situations. Matthew Stafford could be an option if the Rams choose to move on, though that seems unlikely given their current success. The Raiders might also look at younger quarterbacks who haven't yet reached their full potential, such as Justin Fields, Trey Lance, or Zach Wilson. We've seen players like Baker Mayfield and Geno Smith have success in their later years, so the Raiders could take a chance on one of these quarterbacks, hoping they thrive with a fresh start. Of course, there's always the possibility of sticking with the current roster, with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. If the Raiders choose to go this route, O'Connell would likely start, but I'd also be curious to see how Minshew performs under the guidance of new offensive coordinator Scott Turner. Many fans criticized Minshew during his previous stints, but I believe the real issue for the Raiders this season wasn't the quarterback play. It was the inconsistent coaching, especially with Luke Getsy. Turner has shown more promise, and I'd like to see how he can develop a quarterback in his system. The Raiders certainly have many options. They can go for a veteran quarterback, stick with their current players, or even draft a promising talent in the second round. As the offseason approaches, these decisions will shape the direction of the team. When it comes to the Raiders' quarterback situation, there are several interesting options to consider. One possibility is drafting a quarterback with high upside in the second or third round. A player like Jalen Milroe could make a lot of sense, and while he may not be ready to start right away, he has potential. If the Raiders decide to go this route, they'd likely stick with Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew as the starter, and if the team struggles, they could turn to the rookie later in the season. This approach would also give the Raiders a chance to evaluate whether the rookie could develop into the franchise quarterback they need. However, if the Raiders aren't sold on Milroe, they could also target other quarterbacks like Jackson Dart. While Dart might be available in the second or third round, there's no rush to start him immediately either. The Raiders would have the flexibility to wait and see how their current quarterbacks perform. If the team struggles, a rookie could take over, or they might be in a better position to select a quarterback in next year's draft. Some exciting prospects for 2025 include Garrett Nussmeier from LSU and Drew Aller from Penn State. Both players have shown impressive performances this season, and many believe they could have been top picks if they declared for this year's draft. Unfortunately for teams looking for a quarterback now, those two will be staying in school for another year. As for this year's class, there are several quarterbacks worth considering, including Carson Beck, who has already declared, and other names like Jalen Milroe and Brady Cook. While Cook isn't as high profile as some of the others, he's had a solid career at Missouri, with impressive stats and a low number of turnovers. He could be a sneaky good pick in the second or third round for the Raiders if they want to develop a quarterback without reaching for one too early. Now, let's shift focus to the best player available BPA strategy for the Raiders in the upcoming draft. Many players are being projected in the top 10, but it's worth noting that some of these projections might not pan out. Players like Will Campbell from LSU, offensive tackle, and Mason Graham from Michigan, defensive tackle, are being hyped up, but I believe they'll end up being drafted lower than expected, possibly outside the top 10. This means the Raiders could get a good deal on players who are being undervalued. When considering what the Raiders need, quarterback is obviously a priority, but other positions like wide receiver and running back are crucial as well. This year's running back class is one of the best we've seen in over a decade, and the Raiders would be wise to target a running back early. Players like RJ Harvey from UCF have had stellar seasons and could be great additions to the team. Given the depth of talent in this class, the Raiders might even draft 2 running backs to strengthen their backfield. In conclusion, the Raiders have multiple options to consider when it comes to the quarterback position and beyond. Whether they go with a high-upside rookie quarterback, stick with veterans, or target other positions like running back, it's crucial for them to make strategic decisions that will help the team grow and succeed in the long run. The upcoming draft is filled with opportunities, and the Raiders have the chance to make a significant impact. In discussing the Raiders' potential picks in the upcoming draft, especially regarding running backs, it's important to look at Ashton Gent's viability as a top 10 selection. While Gent has had an impressive season, his high carry count, 345 attempts, could be a factor in evaluating his value. He ranks 4th in yards per carry, but his competition level and the volume of attempts raise some questions. Other running backs, such as Trayvon Henderson from Ohio State, 6.9 yards per attempt, and RJ Harvey from UCF, 6.8 yards per attempt, have posted similar or better numbers in tougher conferences. Despite the hype surrounding Gent, there's skepticism about him going in the top 10 due to his size. He's listed at 5 feet 7 inches, which raises concerns about whether any running back of that stature has had the success typically expected from a top 15 pick. Given the deep pool of running back talent in this class, including players like Harvey, Caleb Johnson from Iowa, and potentially Damon Martinez from Miami, taking a running back in the top 10 might not make sense for the Raiders. The second to third round offers great value for running backs, and the Raiders could address their needs there. The sheer depth of the class makes it plausible to wait and still grab a highly productive back. Moreover, looking at the broader draft picture, the Raiders might also want to consider other positions. While running back is important, the value of other positions in the top 10 cannot be ignored. Players like Will Johnson, cornerback, and top edge rusher candidates such as Abdul Carter and Josiah Stewart could be more valuable. Although the Raiders don't necessarily need a top edge rusher, the value at this position is high. There are also potential first-round defensive tackle prospects, though the defensive tackle class isn't as strong as in recent years, making it a less urgent need for the Raiders at that spot. Additionally, wide receiver remains a key position for the Raiders to address, and players like Travis Hunter and Totoro McMillan stand out in this draft class. Hunter is explosive and a game-changer, while McMillan, with his 6 feet 5 inches frame, brings a physical, Drake London-like presence that is tough to cover. McMillan could be a strong addition to the receiving corps, providing a weapon that fits a variety of offensive schemes. In summary, the Raiders should avoid taking a running back too high, given the depth at the position. They would be better off addressing cornerback, edge, defensive tackle, and wide receiver earlier in the draft, where the value is likely to yield a higher return on investment for the team's future. In wrapping up the discussion on the Raiders' potential draft strategies, the focus shifts to addressing key positions. One of the main needs is a true X wide receiver. Players like Totoro McMillan, who are compared to Calvin Johnson in size and style, could be a great fit, especially for a team like the Raiders who need a dominant receiver. While Travis Hunter is widely regarded as the best wide receiver in the draft, it's unlikely he'll be available by the time the Raiders pick, as he's expected to be taken early. Another critical area for the Raiders is the offensive line, specifically at tackle. There are several quality prospects to consider, such as Josh Connor, Kelvin Banks, and Josh Simmons, who could potentially be drafted in the first round. If the Raiders opt for one of these tackles, they could move DJ Glaze inside to guard, creating a more solid offensive line. As for quarterback, Shatter Sanders, who could be available for the Raiders, may not be the right fit, especially given the hesitation some teams have about the current quarterback class. The general sentiment is that teams may prefer to focus on taking non-quarterback players who could make an immediate impact, like defensive players or offensive linemen, instead of reaching for a quarterback like Sanders or other high-risk options. The draft looks to be filled with a lot of exciting talent this year, with standout prospects in wide receiver, running back, and interior offensive line. The running back class, in particular, is especially deep, and teams could end up with future stars even if they don't take one in the first round. As the Raiders prepare for the draft, it's clear that they'll need to make strategic decisions based on available talent and future team needs. With the draft fast approaching, the team will have a crucial opportunity to either build for the future or find immediate contributors to improve the roster.